We are just 6 days away from 2025 NFL free agency being opened, and we have a lot to discuss on this live edition of Dolphins Today by Chat Sports. I am Nic Rohloff. Appreciate everyone taking some time out of their days to join us on this Tuesday live show, as we are always live on these Tuesday afternoons. We'll discuss a lot going between free agent targets, Dolphins news, my perfect free agency plan, how Chris Grier can create some last-minute cap space, as well as a Dolphins mock draft roundup from ESPN and The Athletic. So stay tuned because there is a lot to discuss here just a couple days before the big week ahead in NFL free agency. But as we always do, start us off by shouting out your city, where all the real ones watching from. Let me know where the people are tuned in from on this fine Tuesday afternoon, March 4th. Man, it feels like we have had such a slow-moving off-season here at the channel with the Dolphins, considering there hasn't been too many storylines surrounding Miami. We had the initial wave of the Tyreek Hill trade rumors, but outside of that, it's been quiet, but things are going to heat up over the next couple of weeks. I Like Potatoes is watching from Miami. My guy Tyson's in Miami. King Gaming's in Atlanta, Jeffrey's in Hollywood, Florida, Richard's in Florida, John is in Virginia, Robert's watching from Stockton, California. Appreciate everyone tuning in here on today's episode. It's going to be a fun show as we're talking legit football stuff today, man. I know a lot of us, we talk about rumors and we've done these segments, but when you start to get around these events, free agency, the NFL draft, you really get to think about how these players will shape the future of the NFL, whether it's joining the Dolphins roster, joining other teams, players getting released, like Davante Adams today got released by the New York Jets. That somewhat impacts the Dolphins. We'll discuss that today as well. So appreciate everyone joining us. D watching from Charlotte, North Carolina. I love Charlotte, North Carolina. Love that city. I'd love to get back there. Shout out to the crew that went to Charlotte a couple years ago here at Chat Sports. Gary's in Brooklyn. B-Show is in Fort Lauderdale. Kristen is in Tracy, California. South Pittsburgh, Tennessee for Scott. And I see a South Carolina from Power. All right, the Dolphins currently have $14 million in cap space, as we are just 6 days away from free agency. That's not much. So the Dolphins don't have a lot to make moves right now, signing free agents, but there is ways for Miami to create a decent chunk of cap space, whether it's restructuring Tua, Bradley Chubb, Tyreek Hill, Zach Sealer, Austin Jackson. They can get close to $55, $57 million in cap space. Will they restructure everybody to get there? Probably not. But that's why I want to ask this question for the Dolphins fans. Do you think Miami will enter March 10th, NFL free agency on Monday, with over or under $30 million in cap space? Right now it's at $14 million, thanks to Teron Armstead. Will they create $17 more million in the next 4 or 5 days? Type O for over, U for under. What are your guys' thoughts on where the cap space will ultimately land for Miami? Tyson saying over. Richard saying over. Scott is saying over. D is saying they're going to stay under. I hope not. I hope it's more than 30. They can get over 30 mil by just restructuring Chubb, Jackson, Sealer. They don't even got to restructure Tua's contract, but Tua can create $19.5 million just by himself by restructuring his contract. Logan saying over. Gary over. King Gaming over. Wesner over, Alvin under, Jeffrey over, Robert over. Interesting. Very interesting. Tough decisions to come for Chris Grier. There's no doubt about that. Very tough decisions. Justin, what do you think? Would you guess over or under? Justin says over. Interesting. All right. We got about 75, 80 people watching here early in our build-up portion. I have an interesting thing here. We're going to do a competition for the month of March. I know maybe you guys aren't going to hit it. We have some big hitters here at the channel, some of them not in the chat right now, but my bosses wanted to do a March competition. And it's for the month of free agency, leading up to April where the draft is. And it's starting today because it's on our live shows. Whoever sends in the most bangs, that's what we call it, the Bang March competition, which is $50 super chats here at the channel. Whoever sends the most $50 super chats in the month of March, signed Dan Marino jersey going to that person. So that's just a competition for the month of March. Just an example right there. It's an example right there. Oh, man, it's really possible there. It's going to be fun. We'll see. It says we'll start today. A lot of people will be tuning in on Monday on free agency day as we will be going live for free agency. If you want a head start on the competition, today is a good chance to get that. You see the jersey? It's autographed. Just saying. It'll be very interesting. It'll be a lot of fun. Free agency starts on Monday, Carter. Which brings us to this question. Who is your top free agent target for the Miami Dolphins? Talked about the cap space Miami currently holds, only about $14 million. There's needs on the offensive line, the defensive line, safety, backup quarterback. Who is your top free agent target for the Miami Dolphins? Carter saying Talawani Hufanga, the safety from San Francisco. B-Show says Dre Greenlaw, the off-ball linebacker, and Will Fries. Carter's also saying James Daniels, the guard from Pittsburgh Steelers. I have a couple names that we've frequently talked about this offseason. I'd say my top three targets are Julian Blackmon from the Colts at safety, Will Fries from the Colts at offensive guard, and I'd probably put James Daniels as the offensive guard as well. Bill Lyon is saying Will Fries. Bobby's saying Garrett. I don't know what Garrett you're referring to. Is that Myles Garrett? That's a trade target. It's also not going to happen. Carter's also saying Nick Bolton. Nick Bolton, I believe, is not a free agent. I could be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure Nick Bolton is not a free agent. Tyson saying Charvarius Ward. Listen, I'd love to get Charvarius Ward, but he's going to get a bag. He's going to get $15+ million per season without a question. Nick Bolton is a free agent. Interesting. I didn't know he was a free agent. Why has nobody talked about him? Was he just really bad this year? Yeah, okay. I guess. I don't know. I haven't really looked at linebacking free agents, to be honest. The way I view Miami addressing their linebacker situation this year is re-signing Tyrell Dodson and then just drafting a linebacker, and then boom, there's your three, and then they'll probably sign someone vet min for their fourth or veteran or UDFA. I'd be interested in Charvarius Ward, but he's going to cost you $15+ million per season. I just don't see Miami paying that, though. That's my issue. I don't see them paying that. I don't see that. Deron Bland, he is under contract for sure. That one I can guarantee you he is not available. Carter saying Jair if he gets cut. Hey, if he gets cut, I'd take Jair Alexander for cheap. My question is Jair Alexander going to sign for cheap? Probably not. He's probably going to try to get double digits per season. That's probably too much for a player in him that just, to me, is too injury prone. What about Nick Chubb? I am absolutely on Nick Chubb. I would sign Nick Chubb to a very cheap contract. Like, it'd have to be like vet min because he's going to be your third back and your short yardage guy. But yeah, I'd draft Nick Chubb. Sign Nick Chubb for that like vet min type of deal. And if he's too pricey, well then I'm fine drafting a physical running back on day 3 of the draft. Well, whether it be Raheem Sanders from South Carolina, Phil Maffa from Clemson. Like, I'm fine drafting a physical short yardage downhill running back, or like Ollie Gordon too. You have Jalen Wright and Devon Achane. So I'm not spending in free agency on a running back just for short yard situations. I would use one of the 3 7th-round picks or one of the 2 5th-round picks you have on that type of position. That's just me personally. All right, make sure you hit that thumbs up icon to get the show started. We need about 50% like rate to get the episode started. We have a lot to talk about here on today's Dolphins live show. We need probably about 15 more likes to get the show started, so hit that thumbs up icon. I think it's going to be very easy to get 15 more likes. Hit the like button right now to get our show started because we have 4 segments to get to, and they are doozies. The first one will be Dolphins fans will not like the news today coming in from the NFL. Chris Grier, is he making moves to create cap space for the Miami Dolphins? My perfect free agency plan for the Miami Dolphins if I was the GM, if I was Chris Grier making these signings. And we'll also take a look at some Miami Dolphins draft rumors as well on this show. We'll look at some mock drafts post-combine from ESPN and The Athletic, seeing who the Dolphins have taking. And I promise you this, folks, there have been players we've discussed in the past, but they have not been commonly mocked to Miami going into the NFL Combine, which is going to be fascinating to discuss. But we got to get about 5 or 6 more likes. We got to get 5 or 6 more likes. Come on, hit that thumbs up icon. Let's get to the number we need, and let's get today's show started. Who's going to be the person to step up and get us started and running with today's show? Who's it going to be? Alex Kappa? No. He was the worst offensive lineman in football last year. Injuries have derailed his career, but he was so bad last year for Cincinnati. No. No. If you're getting cut by the Cincinnati Bengals on the offensive line, you know you're bad. That offensive line in Cincinnati has been worse than Miami's or on par with it. And if they're cutting you, that means you know you're bad. All right. We got the like number I was looking for. Time to jump in to the first show of the day. We're talking news surrounding the Dolphins here on a day that had a lot of news. So let's get into it. Loaded show here at Dolphins Today by Chad Sports. I am Nic Rohloff. We have a lot of news to react to, one of them being the future of Tyreek Hill. I think it was just revealed by something another team in the NFL did. We'll discuss about that. Plus a trade target for the Miami Dolphins off of the board. Where could Miami pivot at that specific position? But we're going to get into Tyreek Hill first, and it all starts with what the New York Jets did early yesterday, releasing Davante Adams. Obviously, they traded for him before the deadline. 3rd round pick. Could have jumped up to a 2nd if they met certain requirements. Did not. He ultimately is off of the roster. Not even 7 months later. A disaster in there. And there's a couple reasons to me why this is impactful for the Dolphins. One, from a positive lens, Davante Adams is no longer inside the division because when you played the Jets down the stretch last year, he actually played pretty well against you. He torched Kendall Fuller and Jalen Ramsey in what I thought was the best game of the season for the Jets offense in that, week 14, week 15 game in Miami where the Jets offense put up like 28 points and Aaron Rodgers threw for 300 yards. But the reason why I wanted to talk about this in relation to Miami is because what happened today in terms of the Jets releasing Davante Adams to save themselves $29 million in cap space is exactly what will happen to Tyreek Hill next year. Because Tyreek Hill's contract is just so proportioned, if you will. Now, that was by design from Chris Grier and the Dolphins to push cap space down the road to help them try to build a roster in 23 and 24 that they believed could compete for a Super Bowl. This year, his cap hit is $28.6 million. That's honestly not too bad for a top 5, top 10 wide receiver in the NFL at this point, so I'm not fretting about that. But in 2026, his cap hit is $51.8 million with a $30 million base. That's the final year of his contract. I want it to be abundantly clear for the Dolphins fans watching this on March 4th or March 5th, 2025. There is absolutely no world where Tyreek Hill is wearing a Miami Dolphins uniform and on the football field playing on that price tag in 2026. $51.8 million is what a top-tier quarterback's cap hit is. Not a 32, not a 33-year-old wide receiver. I know Tyreek Hill is arguably a top 3, top 5 wide receiver in Dolphins history in the short time he's been here, but there's no chance he should be allowed and will be allowed to play on that cap number in 2026. So the obvious thing is that the Dolphins ultimately either trade him or cut him. And I want to ask you, before I give you my official thoughts on the matter, will the Dolphins cut Tyreek Hill next year? Type Y for yes, type N for no. Let me know if you think Miami ultimately releases Tyreek Hill following this season. Get your thoughts down in the comment section. Well, I think they will if they do not trade him. And I sent this tweet out yesterday on March 4th that the Dolphins should trade Tyreek Hill at the NFL trade deadline if they are underachieving like they did in 2024. Why? Is because they're going to be forced to cut Tyreek Hill in 2026, or at least before the season in 2026. So if you could get a 5th, a 6th round pick back at the trade deadline rather than just losing him for nothing and creating cap space, which you'd be able to do anyway, then you should absolutely try to do that. Because if you think about what Miami would be getting in return for Tyreek Hill if they released him, it's quite a lot. Miami does not have a lot of cap space already in 2026. I believe they're actually already projected to be over the cap in 2026, and we haven't even signed any 2025 free agents yet. But the Dolphins releasing Tyreek Hill after this upcoming season in the 26 offseason, pre-June 1st, so before free agency begins in 26, would save Miami $36.3 million. The dead cap hit for Tyreek Hill next year would only be $15.5 million. And I know it sounds terrible to be paying a player $15.5 million not to play for you, but the savings of $36.3 million will just be too good to pass up, similar to what happened with Davante Adams and the New York Jets, which is why, to me, I believe this is the final year that Tyreek Hill plays in a Dolphins uniform. Hill had a great career for the Miami Dolphins. There's no question about that. Entering his final season here as the 4th year in Miami, he's put up 4,400 yards, 26 touchdowns in 50 games. He's been absolutely terrific. 1,700 yards in back-to-back years, and would have had another 1,000-yard season in 2024 if it wasn't for Tua only playing 11 games and getting injured. I appreciate Tyreek Hill for the good seasons. It was awesome to have what you could consider the top wide receiver in all football playing for the Dolphins in 2022, in 2023. I think the trade that Chris Grier made to acquire Hill and the contract he gave him was justified. It was worth it. I know it did not result in a Super Bowl yet a playoff win, but Tyreek Hill was everything the Dolphins could have thought him to be when they made that trade, and it's unfortunate that he is going to have to end his Dolphins tenure the way it will ultimately go down. I know I'm speaking in absolutes right now, but it's just the way I see things happening. There's just no way to me this ends any other way than what happened today with Davante Adams and the New York Jets, where he got released. All right, we're going to transition from Tyreek Hill to talking about a Dolphins trade target who came off the board because he actually got traded by a different team. But before we get into all of that, I do want to give some major love to Prize Picks, the sponsor on today's show. I play Prize Picks every single day. It's so easy. All you do is pick more or less on 2 or more player stat projections, and you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. Prize Picks, you could play daily. You could play season long. Basketball, hockey, golf, baseball's around the corner. You could already put in some season-long projections on football as well. And when you get correct entries and picks, safe and secure withdrawals are Prize Picks specialty. You get your money in as quick as 15 minutes. I put in a 3-player entry for the football season ahead of us here. I go 3 less than Jared Goff, 4,200 passing yards, less than Travis Kelce, 774.5 receiving yards, and less than Jaden Daniels, 824.5 rushing yards. Going 3-player entry here. They also offer weekly promotions like Taco Tuesday, where you can get select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. One more time, download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. That link is in the description and comments of today's video. All right, let's get over to the next news here, and it has to do with a trade. The Rams traded offensive lineman Jonah Jackson to the Chicago Bears in exchange for a 2025 sixth-round pick. They mentioned the trade can't be processed until the league year actually begins on March 12th. But this is kind of a bummer, in my opinion, because when you look at Jonah Jackson, which we discussed him last week as a potential trade target for the Dolphins after it was reported that he will be made available on the trade market, I said I'd be interested in him. He could play left guard. He could play right guard, a big-time position of need for the Miami Dolphins. Only has a base salary of $9 million this season, has a $17 million cap hit next year, but you could lower that by extending him or moving off of him prior to the 2026 season. And if you only had to offer a sixth-round pick in this year's draft, that would have been very valuable, in my opinion, and it would have been a really good buy low move by Chris Grier. The Dolphins have 2 fifth-round picks. They have 3 seventh-round picks heading into the NFL draft. No sixth-rounders, but they could offer 2 sevenths. They could have offered 1 fifth, which would have obviously topped the Bears' offer. To me, this was a trade that I would have made because it would have slotted in a starting left guard, and you would have went into free agency already knowing that you have one of your guard spots kind of filled out, and you only needed to sign one or draft one to be your starting right guard. We'll talk about what happens next for Miami at the guard spot, but make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Can we get to 67,700 subscribers on today's show? We are 58 away. I think we can. Hit that sub button, join the channel, because we will have you covered with every single piece of Dolphins news and rumors over the next week and a half with free agency looming. Well, with Jonah Jackson not being targeted in a trade, here are the top 8 free agent targets that I think the Dolphins may go after on the offensive line. We've shown this graphic quite a bit in this offseason, talking about Will Fries, James Daniels, Aaron Banks, Mekhi Becton, but we haven't really talked about some other names like Will Hernandez, Patrick McCarry, Tevin Jenkins, and Kevin Zeitler. I think those 4 can all be options for Miami. I also think another sneaky option could be Brandon Scherff from the Jacksonville Jaguars, cheap potential 1-year cheap contract guy that ultimately is a mentor to a rookie you take on day 2 of the NFL draft potentially. The one thing is abundantly clear. The Miami Dolphins absolutely need to address offensive line and free agency. And if he doesn't, referring to Chris Grier, I might have to fly to Miami, find his office, and start a riot with pitchforks and signs outside of his office, because enough is enough neglecting the offensive line. That was a list of 8 players that would be major upgrades over what Miami started last year in Robert Jones and Liam Eichenberg. If you sign 2 of those 8 guys, I will be jumping for joy. And I will be very happy with what Chris Grier did in free agency. You sign 1 and then plan on doing 1 in the draft, I'll be okay with that. You sign none of those 8 guys, and like I mentioned, I'm going with pitchforks and burning flames to Chris Grier's office. But I also wanted to mention some offensive line draft targets for Miami, assuming the Dolphins don't ultimately sign 2 from that list of 8, because if we were going to be honest, I know Miami, and they're probably not going to. These 5 are the best 5, I think, offensive guards potentially for Miami in the draft. Will Campbell, after the way he was able to test at the combine, is probably viewed more as a guard rather than a tackle and might slip down boards to where Miami could snatch him at 13. Calvin Banks Jr., I would anticipate him being available at 13. I also think he tested like a guard and is an option for the Dolphins, similar offensive scheme from Steve Sarkisian in Texas. Gray Zabel is an intriguing name. That's a late first-rounder, early second-round name. Same thing for Donovan Jackson from Ohio State. And then Jonas Savaina, hopefully I said that somewhat right, probably not. He is a second-round target for the Dolphins on the interior offensive line. But you may be thinking, Nick, why is Tyler Booker not on your interior offensive line draft targets list? I do not think Tyler Booker will actually be on Chris Grier's draft board when things are all said and done heading into late April's draft. Tyler Booker, who is viewed as maybe the top peer offensive guard in this draft, did not test well at the NFL Combine. He did not show good athleticism, some speed. His 10-yard split wasn't good. 40-yard dash was not good for someone of his size. And we know Chris Grier and this Dolphins scheme requires you to be athletic, be able to get out in the perimeter, and in a zone run blocking scheme. And because Chris Grier does not value guards as much as tackles, and Booker is not an athlete for his position, I do not think that Chris Grier and Mike McDaniel will target Tyler Booker at all with pick number 13. And if they are not targeting him at 13, well, then they will not draft him. So to me, I think you could take Tyler Booker off your boards. I don't think there's any chance the Dolphins draft him. But you guys let me know your thoughts on the matter. Will Tyler Booker be on Chris Grier's draft board in late April? If you think he remains on, type on. If you think he remains off, type off. I think he's off, man. I like Booker as a player. I like his physical nature. I like his mentality. Just I know what the Dolphins like in an offensive line. Tyler Booker is the opposite of that. All right, that will do it for today's show. Make sure you do subscribe to the channel because whether it's draft news, draft rumors, free agency content, we will have you covered. And as free agency gets underway on Monday, March 10th, make sure you subscribe and have your notifications turned on because there will be fireworks and we'll cover it all here at the channel. All right, that's it for the first segment. Tyson's saying on. I don't think he is. I don't think he will be. I really don't. Cam's with me saying off. I like Tyler Booker, the player. I just know what the Dolphins like in an offensive guard and an offensive lineman, and I just don't think Tyler Booker is that whatsoever. I really don't. I really don't. Tyson says he's changing his mind, saying off. Cameron's saying off. Callum's tuning in from Nottingham, England. That's electric. Appreciate you. Appreciate you from tuning in. What about Armand Membu? Yeah, Membu will be very high on the Dolphins draft board. One issue with that, folks, he's probably going in the top 10. Especially after his combine performance, I think he might be the first offensive lineman off the board. He could go as high as number 4 to New England, people are saying now. Saw multiple mock drafts. I think Dane Brugler had him at 4, and I believe Jordan Reed of ESPN also had him at 4. So Armand Membu, after the combine, people are talking about him being the first offensive lineman off the board, man. Crazy. Tyler Booker's a good player. It's not me disputing that. He's a good ball player. But I just don't think after what he did at the combine, he'll be on the Dolphins draft board. It's not a Dolphins offensive lineman, man. Not a Dolphins offensive lineman. Appreciate everybody tuning in on today's live show. Coming up next, we're going to have some big moves coming. Is GM Chris Grier going to make a splash move to the roster to create some cap space? I think it's very possible. I think it's very, very possible. We'll go through all the possible moves that Miami could make in free agency right now. So you know what? Let's get right into it. Let's break it down on today's show. NFL free agency is getting closer and closer. Is GM Chris Grier going to make some big moves to create some cap space for this Dolphins group that needs to address so many positions in NFL free agency? Because right now, Miami is currently with 14.5, lower to 14, close around that range. It's hard to know exactly for sure in cap space before the league year begins, but there's a way and there's a avenue that Chris Grier could ultimately get this Dolphins cap space number all the way up to $57 million before free agency. And that is quite the big jump. I mean, that's creating what, $30 or $43 million in cap space over the next 4 or 5 days. It's certainly possible. And if you want the Dolphins to create cap space, hit that thumbs up icon. Every like on this video, I was told, equals $100 more in cap space. So we get 4,000 likes. Well, we're getting a lot more cap space, folks. Hit that thumbs up icon. Tongue-in-cheek here, but get the good mojo. Help Chris Grier out because, boy, does he need help. Hit that thumbs up icon. I do want to remind people that free agency is March 10th, so 5-6 days away until Dolphins could start signing some people. And I do expect Grier to make some contract restructures between now and then. He simply has to. If he goes into free agency with $14 million cap space, you can basically bank on Miami doing absolutely nothing. The number one way that the Dolphins could actually create cap space before free agency is restructuring QB1's contract. Tua Tagovailoa obviously signed that 4-year contract extension prior to last season where he got paid a boatload of money. Well, if you restructured his contract to the max, you can actually free up $19 million in cap space for this offseason. And when you look at what his contract restructure would look like, it's basically adding on a void year in 2029 and shaving off cap space from this season and the next couple of years and adding it on, right? His cap number in 2025 would go from $39.4 million to $20 million, and then you add $2 million in 26, 2 years, or $7 million in 2028, and stuff like that, to where you have larger cap hits between 26 and 29, but you get $19 million in cap space for 2025 free agency. It's certainly an intriguing hypothetical. Is it the best course of action for the Miami Dolphins? That remains to be seen, and that's kind of where I'll go with this here in just a second. But getting a full $19-20 million in cap space, I mean, guys, that could be, no joke, a starting offensive guard, starting safety for this Dolphins football team, 2 big-time positions of need just by restructuring his contract and pushing some money down the line. It's an intriguing hypothetical. So what do you say? Should the Dolphins restructure Tua's contract right now to help them sign players in this free agency crop, but kind of lock them in more down the line? Type Y for yes or type N for no. It's certainly a tough call because, yes, that $19.5 million would be very, very helpful right now. Like I mentioned, you could basically sign a starting offensive guard to protect Tua as well as a starting safety to replace Javon Holland for that price number or under that price number. But it would make it incredibly difficult to move off of his contract in the future. You just have more dead money piling up. His cap hit comes larger and larger between 26, 27, 28, and then that void year in 2029. If you are still skeptical of Tua's long-term future with the Dolphins, which remains to be seen on this front office and coaching staff is, well, then you probably hold off. But then again, if this front office and coaching staff is pressured to win right now, then they should probably free up that money. But if I was in charge and I had job security, I probably would not push money down the line because I need to see Tua win meaningful football games in November, in December, in January, hopefully, with a playoff win. And if he's unable to do that in 2025 or 2026, I'm probably moving off of him. But if you restructure his contract and push that money down the line, it's going to be incredibly difficult to move off of Tagovailoa, which is why, unfortunately, even though it would be nice to create that $20 million cap space, I'm not going to do it. But you can still create some decent size cap if you restructure these 3, Bradley Chubb, Zach Sealer, and Austin Jackson. These 3, in my opinion, have a pretty decent chance of sticking on this roster for the next couple of seasons, specifically Zach Sealer and Austin Jackson. And we're going to start with Bradley Chubb because if you aren't going to release Bradley Chubb post-June 1st, which if you did that, by the way, would save you $19 million in cap space, you would not get it to get used for free agency, but it would provide you with some flexibility down the line in the offseason. Then you need to restructure his contract. Because if you restructure his contract right now, it would save you $13.7 million. And if you know for 1,000% certainty you are going to keep him for this upcoming year at bare minimum, restructure the deal. You can't have him have a cap hit of $29 million this season. Restructure it, save the $13.7 million, use that money to sign an offensive guard, safety, and free agency, build out this roster. I think restructuring Bradley Chubb is a necessity for this Dolphins football team. And I'll tell you right now, as we get closer and closer to free agency, if the Dolphins make a move, whether it's a contract restructure, a re-signing of their own guy, or sign someone at the start of free agency, we will have you covered. So make sure you subscribe, join the channel right now, because we'll have you covered. All right, let's transition it over to Zach Sealer. Should the Dolphins restructure what could be said as the best defensive player on this Dolphins team. He had an incredibly good 2023 season and followed it up with a great year in 2024. A restructure of his contract doesn't save you a boatload of money, but it does give you $5.5 million. And to me, if it's getting you $5.5 million, there is no downside to that. Zach Sieler has showed no signs of decline. He is one of the most battle-tested players on your team as well in terms of playing through injuries. He's not an injury-prone guy. He is one of the top locker room characters in your group, in your organization. To me, you are guaranteeing that he is going to be on this roster for the next 2 to 3 seasons. And as it sits right now, like, there's no reason for you not to want him on the roster for the next couple of years. So, yeah, keep Zach Sieler, free up the $5.5 million in cap space right now by restructuring his contract. We'll continue to talk here in just a second, but I want to make sure you are representing the Dolphins. It's starting to get a little bit more warmer around the country. Represent the Dolphins with this sweet Nike gray t-shirt. $5 off right now when you go to chatsports.com/Dolphins gray shirt. Link is in the description and comments of today's video. Sizes are running out. We only have, I believe, double X's through smalls. The bigger sizes are out. Get yours today. chatsports.com/Dolphins gray shirt. All right, how about Austin Jackson, the right tackle? Because if you restructured his contract, it would actually save you $7.3 million in cap space. And to me, this is another no-brainer. Listen, you have a lot of issues on this offensive line. Austin Jackson, you gave him that 3-year contract extension last year. Got a couple years left on his deal. You expect him to keep and stay on this roster for the foreseeable future, at least as your right tackle, or maybe you move him back to guard. Who knows? Anything's on the table with this Dolphins offensive line. But since you already know, and that's the thing with him and Sieler, in my opinion, you know that these two are going to be on your roster this year and in 2026. So if you know they're going to be here the next 2 seasons, restructure, help you get cap space now. And here's kind of the outlook on the story, right? I mentioned it. If you do not restructure to his contract, which, remember, I said I would probably not restructure Tua Tagovailoa's contract. I would let it ride out because I want the flexibility for the future. The Dolphins could still get around $38 million in cap space. They can get to 57 if they restructure Tua. But if they don't restructure Tua and they just do Sieler, Jackson, and Chubb, well, guess what? You have $38 million in cap space. That provides you the availability to re-sign some key players like Tyrell Dodson, Kader Kohu, potentially Calais Campbell. Go out and sign some exterior free agents as well. To me, restructuring those 2 defensive players, and then Austin Jackson, no-brainer. Create the $38 million in cap space, and then move forward through free agency. But let me know your thoughts. Over under $30 million in cap space before free agency. It should be over if you ultimately do what I say and restructure Jackson, Chubb, and Sieler. Let me know your thoughts. O for over or U for under. And with that cap space, I want to quickly just glance at what the biggest needs for the Dolphins are. Once again, obviously, interior offensive line is at the top of the list. Left guard, right guard, replacing Robert Jones and Liam Eichenberg is an absolute must. You need to overhaul your safety room. Javon Holland is walking. Jordan Poyer is cooked. You need a new starting free safety, a new starting strong safety. You need to address interior defensive line next to Zach Sieler, boundary corner opposite of Jalen Ramsey. And you also need an off-ball linebacker, too, to complement Jordan Brooks. All 5 of these needs will not be perfectly executed and finished and addressed in NFL free agency. I would probably say that 3 or 5 of these will be addressed in free agency, and then we will turn our attention to the draft. So stay on the lookout, be subscribed, because when these things happen, we will have you covered with videos, and if it's good enough, we will go live as well on the channel. So hit that sub button. Join us here at Miami Dolphins Today. All right, 2 segments down. 2 segments down. What's up, Ty Man? Frank O'Connor in the building. Frank, how are you doing, my friend? How are you doing, Frank? Robert says, can't stop kicking the can down the street. Here's my thing, though. Like, you're not really kicking the can down the street. Like, it's not that much money. It's not like it's like a Derek Carr contract restructure. Kicking the can down the street is restructuring Tua. That's what that is. And that's why I said I wouldn't do it. That's why I said I wouldn't do it. If you restructure Tua, you're telling the fan base you're kicking the can down the street, like Robert mentions. But restructure the other players, no, not really. I don't think so. Frank says, great, but exhausted trying to do side jobs because work is slow. Oh, sorry to hear that, Frank. Frank, I don't even know what you do. Frank, what do you do, my friend? If you don't mind sharing. If you don't want to share, that's fine, Frank. Yeah, Davante Adams is available, Linda. Afton says, what are your thoughts on drafting Jalen Milroe in the second or third round? In. Not second round. Third round, maybe. I'd be in on a third round for Milroe. Pick number 98, you got a comp pick, I would draft him. Second round's too high, 48's way too high. But if he was sitting there on the board at 30 or 98, I'm in. Because here's my thing, Justin, as well, and I could bring you in the conversation. I don't know what your thoughts on Jalen Milroe are. He's a developmental guy. He struggles in accuracy, struggles in terms of, I would say, decision-making as well. Had a lot of turnovers last year, which was disappointing. But year one, guaranteed to have an impact in short yardage situations, and you could create a wildcat package for the red zone and for short yard situations utilizing Milroe's legs, because he is arguably one of the best rushers in this draft if you include running backs. Like, he had 20 rushing touchdowns last year. He is so dynamic with the ball in his hands. So to me, you draft him with a third-round pick, you're getting a player. I'm not going to compare him to Taysom Hill, but you can use similar in a Taysom Hill role as like a runner. That's what I'm saying. Milroe, as you mentioned, Milroe is better than Skylar Thompson. So I'll take the shot if he's there in the third. That's true. Yeah, maybe. I'm kind of with Frank, though, is that he's talking about Jackson Dart here. A lot of Dolphins fans love Jackson Dart. I love Jackson Dart. I think there's a chance Jackson Dart goes in round 1. But Jackson Dart will not be there at 98 when the Miami Dolphins are picking in the third round. There's a chance he's there at 48, but I still don't think Miami should use the second-round pick on a QB. I still don't. Still don't. There's a chance he's there at 48, but even if he is, I wouldn't use the pick there. I wouldn't. I just simply wouldn't. We'll see how the draft or how free agency plays out. We will. See how free agency plays out. I just don't think it's worth on a team that is still trying to compete for a title now using the 48th pick on a quarterback in a weak quarterback class. That's my issue as well. I like Dart, but it's a weak QB class. You install internet? Interesting. That's cool. So you actually, are you the salesman? Are you the person actually installing it? Yeah, I guess so. Frank's cracking me up because I actually installed it. I couldn't sell water in the desert. That's good stuff. All right, we got 2 more segments coming up here in just a second. Next one is my perfect free agency plan. What would I do in free agency with the limited cap space that we have? That answer is going to be, I'm not sick anymore, but I'm still congested for some reason a little bit sometimes. It drives me nuts. I don't have allergies. I'm no longer sick, but you know when you get that like mucus sometimes in your nose and like the throat, it's so annoying. No, I don't have. I've been here for 2.5 years. I don't got allergies. All right, let's get into our third segment here, which is my perfect free agency plan. Miami Dolphins, perfect free agency plan. That is what we're talking about on today's show. I am Nic Rohloff. This is Dolphins Today by Chat Sports. This is not me predicting what Chris Grier will ultimately do for the Miami Dolphins. This is what I would do if I was GM. So when we look back in 2 weeks and see where everybody went free agency, I'll be able to say, well, I wanted to do this. They did this. Good little experiment and exercise on today's show, but in case you were unaware, which it would be hard for you to be unaware of this, but free agency does begin on March 10th. It will be the tampering period, and then things become official on March 12th, but you're able to agree to contracts on March 10th. And before we get to March 10th, these are 3 things that I would do, and I would do some potential contract restructures. Bradley Chubb, Zach Sealer, and Austin Jackson, because as things currently stand right now, as of filming this on Tuesday's live show, the Dolphins have $14 million in cap space. Well, couldn't have changed from that filming to now, but if you restructure Chubb, Sealer, and Austin Jackson to the absolute max, that frees up $24 million in cap space, which would get Miami up to $38 million going into free agency. Now, $38 million is not a ton. You're not going to write home and get excited about that. But it is enough to re-sign some key players. It's also enough to sign some exterior free agents at positions of need. And before we get into what I will start doing with that $38 million in cap space, make sure you are subscribed. Up-to-date content on the Miami Dolphins for NFL free agency. The goal is to get to 68,000 subscribers before free agency begins on March 10th. So we have 3-4 days to get 300 more subscribers. Can we do it? I think we can. Hit that sub button. Let's get to 68K. All right, the first thing I'm doing, and this is something that may have already happened. So if it did, check the comments and I'll let you know. Or just make sure you're subscribed because we'll probably make a video about it. But I would give the right of first refusal tender on Kader Kohou. He's a restricted free agent. Miami has need at nickel corner, needs a boundary corner as well, opposite of Jalen Ramsey. And for $3.2 million in cap space for 2025, it would make a lot of sense for the Dolphins to do that. If someone else signed Kohou to a long-term deal, Miami would be able to match that. And if no one signs him, well, then Miami just gets him back on a 1-year, $3.2 million deal. He was one of the best nickel corners in terms of covering last season. Yes, there's the concern and struggles of tackling, but Kohou, good cover guy, played well in the first year under Anthony Weaver. I'd be excited to see what he does in year 2. I would put the right of first refusal tender on Kader Kohou for $3.2 million. I would also then re-sign Calais Campbell and Tyrell Dodson. So I'm bringing back Kohou, Campbell, and Dodson to this defense. Kohou's a cheap contract. Then Calais Campbell could be had for a 1-year, $5 million kind of deal after his strong 2024 season. And then Tyrell Dodson, I'd sign him to a 2-year deal. About 2 years, $9.3 million, 4.7, 4.6 over the 2 seasons you have him at. I thought he played well in that half year for Miami. He comes in as your off-ball linebacker 2 to Jordan Brooks. This upcoming season, you draft the linebacker in the draft to be that 3rd guy. Campbell's on the defensive line opposite Zach Sealer. Those 3 would be excellent re-sign options to me for the Dolphins. And if you do that, on short-term deals, you would still be left with about $24.1 million in cap space heading into NFL free agency, which then you can really start to look at signing some exterior free agents if you're asking me. But let me know, before we get into my exterior free agent targets for the perfect free agency plan, who is your top free agent target for the Miami Dolphins? Be Chris Grier. Let me know. Who do you want? It's probably going to be a safety or an offensive lineman, but let me know who is your top free agent target for the Miami Dolphins. All right, the first player I'm going to sign, this should be no surprise, but I'm signing a safety, Julian Blackmon from the Indianapolis Colts. I have been a big fan of him over the past couple of months as I've looked more into the free agent list here. He was excellent in coverage this past season for the Indianapolis Colts. He's young. He had a lower missed tackle rate than Javon Holland. Still a little bit high at 15.2%, but Javon Holland was at 18% this past season. So you're getting better, at least in that department, but you're also getting a free safety that can absolutely roam around. Only allowed 65.2 completion percentage, a QB rating when targeted of 92. He was one of the highest graded safeties in terms of pure cover guys. I like Blackman. Then you just address the other strong safety position as well, potentially in the draft, with Patrick Morris as your third safety. I have been pounding the table for a while about Julian Blackman. I'm going to continue to do so as someone who could be a replacement option of Javon Holland, and the contract I'd be offering him is a 3-year, $23.9 million deal. It ascends in value over the next 3 seasons. Cap hit is a little bit lower for 2025, probably close to that $6 million range, and then you have $8.5 and $9 million cap hit for the next couple of seasons, but I would like to get him on a multi-year contract to be someone for the Dolphins that shores up that secondary at that safety room. I really like Blackman. Please, 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 Chris Grier, sign him. I think he's my top guy, as I just asked you that. All right, we're going to get over to some other perfect free agent targets for Miami, in my opinion, but we are sponsored by Prize Picks, the daily fantasy sports app and platform that I play every single day. Get started today on Prize Picks. All you do is pick more or less on 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Prize Picks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. Prize Picks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, Prize Picks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. You can play season-long, daily, across different sports leagues, basketball, hockey, golf, football. Season-long football entry already right here. Less than 4,224 yards for Jared Goff, less than Travis Kelce's 774 receiving yards, and then less than Jaden Daniels' 824 rushing yards is one example of how you can play. Join in the millions of others on Prize Picks right now. Download the app today. Use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. One more time, download the app today. Use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, we're going to go to the offensive line next, and we're actually stealing another player from the Indianapolis Colts in my perfect free agency plan. We're taking Will Fries. I am obsessed with Fries. He did not play a lot in 2024 because he fractured his tibia early on in the season, but he was on pace to be one of the top offensive linemen this past season. Put up gaudy PFF numbers in those first 5 games he played. Was also really good in the zone run blocking scheme. That is obviously the scheme that Miami runs. Fries is an athlete. I don't think that leg injury is going to hold him back as he makes a full recovery. Plus, it happened early in the 2024 season, which would make him easy and ready to be back, ready to go for 2025. Fries would be a perfect fit at right guard or left guard for the Dolphins, ranked 2nd in his limited time, according to PFF, and the zone run blocking scheme grade. And I don't think he's going to be that expensive. ESPN put out a projection for his tier of guards in free agency, and it ranged anywhere between $5 and $8 million. I think it's going to be closer to that $8 million range. I could see him getting close to $10, $11, $12 million if a team really falls in love with him. I think 2 years, $16.7 million is a fair deal for Fries. There's a little bit of a gamble coming in with Fries due to that injury and him not really being a household starting name, but I would be comfortable having him at least come in as the starter to camp, recovering from injury on a multi-year contract. I like Will Fries. I'm willing to take the gamble because I think he's a good fit for this Dolphins offense. I'm citing another guard in free agency. I think the way to go for the offensive line this offseason for Miami is offensive line in free agency and then go to the draft for defense. I'm going with James Daniels, another player that's a little bit of a gamble, but I'm a gambling man. He only played 4 games this past season before suffering a season-ending injury, but just like Fries, he was really, really good in the limited time that he played. PFF numbers through the roof for the Steelers. And that offensive line in Pittsburgh took a little bit of a dip once Daniels went down for injury. I mentioned how Fries, according to PFF, was the second-ranked run-blocking zone guy this past season. Well, you want to know who's number one? Yeah, it's this guy right here, James Daniels. So you add Daniels, you add Fries, you project them to be your starting left guard, right guard combination. You have Patrick Paul at left tackle, Daniels/Fries at left guard, Brewer at center, Daniels/Fries at right guard, Austin Jackson at right tackle. You draft an offensive lineman still in the draft as a depth piece and a future piece because I'm only signing James Daniels to a one-year contract. I'm a little bit less bullish on Daniels long-term. He's been in the league longer. Fries is still 25, 26, 27 years old. Daniels is closer to 28, 29. So I would sign Fries to a multi-year deal. Daniels only a one-year deal. Yeah, it's not a complete commitment to the offensive line like I'd like, but you could still draft one in rounds 2 or round 3 to be that replacement of James Daniels after one season to fill in for that role. You also, guys, you have to go bargain shopping here because the Dolphins don't have a lot of cap space, so it's not like you're going to be signing crazy multi-year contracts, I think, in free agency. But I like both those guys, and my perfect free agency plan, I would sign both. But if you could only pick one, I'm making it difficult for you because I picked both. But if you only could pick one, who would it be? Which one would it be? Will Fries, type WF. If it was James Daniels, type your JDs. I didn't forget about backup quarterback, folks. The last player that I am signing in free agency is Carson Wentz. I know, it's a little bit of a stunner, but a one-year, $4 million contract to me feels like a good value for Carson Wentz. It's not a commitment to a long-term backup, but he would be the best backup quarterback you've had in the Tua Tagovailoa tenure. Jacoby Brissett, he was terrible for Miami. Tyler Huntley, Skylar Thompson, Teddy Bridgewater, I think Carson Wentz is on par or better than all of them. Signed him a one-year, $4 million deal. Draft a quarterback in day 3 to be your developmental backup quarterback and third guy on the practice squad. I think that's the best way to go about it. Cheap contract. That's what a backup quarterback costs, guys. So 1 year, $4 million for Carson Wentz to be that guy. I'm in if Carson Wentz is in. So overall, my haul and my perfect free agency plan, we don't have a lot of cap space, so can't go out and sign like 9, 10 guys, but re-signing Kader Kohou, Calais Campbell, and Tyrell Dodson, adding Julian Blackmon, James Daniels, and Will Fries to the roster, and then also getting Carson Wentz as a backup quarterback as well. Those are my 7 additions in my perfect free agency plan. It's hard to know exactly what Miami will do, considering I don't know how much cap space they will actually have, but that is my perfect plan as well. But it sucks to admit here, as we close out today's show, that Chris Grier has to go bargain shopping. He has to be very selective. So you're going to see free agents fly off the board probably relatively early on Monday morning, Monday afternoon on March 10th, and it's going to be like, well, Mekhi Becton, 3-year, $40 million deal with blank team. Well, that stinks. I mean, the Dolphins could have been interested. But with the cap space situation that Miami has put themselves in, they have to find guys that they truly believe are a home run fit in their system and at a price point that won't cripple them going forward in free agency as well as the NFL draft. So he's going to have to go bargain shopping, cheap players that can be productive right away, and you have to be selective. So I would just remain patient. Yeah, you can blame Chris Grier for it being in this position right now, but you need to be patient when free agency opens on March 10th. You really, really do. And it'd be interesting to see what Grier ultimately comes away with, and we'll have you all covered on what happens. This was my perfect free agency plan, but when things actually do occur in the National Football League surrounding the Miami Dolphins, we will have you covered. So hit that sub button and join the channel today. All right, let me know who you want. Let me know who you want. I see people flaming the Carson Wentz decision. I don't think they realize that all backup quarterbacks are bad. It's just which ones are the least bad. I don't think they realize that. Like, seriously, like, name me a backup quarterback that you seriously could think could go in and, like, win, like, more than 500 games. Exactly, that's the point. Like, there is none. See a couple people seeing Marcus Mariota in the chat. Miami's been linked to Mariota, But I think Marcus is going to get like a 6 mil, 7 mil per season type of backup because he's that high end type of backup guy. I'm not paying. The Dolphins aren't going to pay a backup that much. Not going to pay him that much. Not going to pay him that much. Dolphins Dave says Jimmy Garoppolo. I'm not kidding. I would rather have Carson Wentz than Jimmy Garoppolo. Yeah, I think he's free agent. He's on a 1-year deal with the Rams for sure. Last year. No, Frank, no mailbag today. We got a lot of stuff to talk about. We had 4 segments ready to roll. Frank, I will let you know. I know you said the job was tough, but Frank's one of our big-time supporters here, which is awesome. We're doing a month-long battle here. Whoever sends in the most $50 super chats in the month of March throughout free agency, throughout our weekly live shows, we're going to ship him out this Dan Marino signed or autographed jersey. Pretty sweet. See the signature there? It's in the package still. Wanted to give this out to someone here in the off season. So not going to pressure anyone, but yeah, whoever sends in the most $50 super chats in the month of March, we'll get that shipped out. Yeah, my number one guy would have been Andy Dalton, but Dalton signed a contract already with the Panthers. I'm out on Tevin Jenkins, Mark. Yeah, but Frank, you can ask a question. If you want to get it on screen, best way to I don't know if Justin has the hashtag Dolphins set up, but either way, Frank, we'll get a question. Well, if you want to ask, you get asked. I'm out on Tevin Jenkins. Really good ball player when he stays on the football field. The issue is he consistently plays half the games, and the Dolphins need someone that they can trust on the offensive line to play football. Not just be good, but play football. Availability is very key, people. Especially for the Dolphins. Frank's question, so we're not going to get it on, says, if possible, would be able to trade Bradley Chubb in our 2nd round pick to get a late first if there's a prospect we really like, saves cap, and gets a possible young stud. No, I don't think so, because the trade situation with Chubb doesn't really work out. It doesn't save Miami money unless you do a post-June 1st trade, but obviously the NFL draft is not after June 1st, so it doesn't really create you a lot of cap space, if any. But I do like the idea of trading back up into the 1st round. I'm actually going to talk slightly about that in our final show of the day, because I do think there is a pathway for Miami to trade up and back into the 1st round, and I would love them to do so. So, yeah. But Frank, no, I don't think they'll use Bradley Chubb to trade back into the 1st round. Yeah, there are some wide receivers I'm interested in. Tyson in the middle rounds. I'm interested in Pat Bryant from Illinois. I'm interested in Torrey Horton from Colorado State. I'm interested in Nick Nash from San Jose State. A couple of the guys I really like Jane Higgins out of Iowa State, is probably going to be a 2nd round pick. That's too early for Miami now. Another guy that I liked early on was Eric Iomanor, if I'm saying that right. Yeah, from Stanford. He is probably going to be a 2nd round pick, so that's not going to happen. But I think Torrey Horton's still going to be a mid-round pick. Pat Bryant's probably still mid-round pick. And Nick Nash probably still mid-round pick. I like all those 3 guys for in the 4th round. Miami has 2 4th round picks. I feel comfortable burning one on a wide receiver. I'd like one of them. All right, one more segment to go. Talk about some draft rumors ahead of free agency. I'm not doing my own mock draft, but we'll react to some other mock drafts post NFL Combine. You know what? Let's jump right into it. We're talking some NFL draft rumors on today's show. I am Nic Rohloff. This is Dolphins Today by Chat Sports, because after the NFL Combine, some legends out there from The Athletic and ESPN put out their most recent mock drafts, and I wanted to react to who the Dolphins ended up taking, and that is what we're looking at. The Athletic's Dane Brugler dropped his first mock draft post-Combine, and then Jordan Reed of ESPN did a 2-round mock draft that we're going to react to. So 3 total prospects, because they did not have Miami taking the same one in either of these 2, which is very happy for me, so we get to talk about more. But make sure you are following us over on Instagram at Dolphins Today IG. If you want to be covered on the Miami Dolphins between our YouTube videos, short form content, normal posts as well, follow us at Dolphins Today IG. We're about 250 followers from 1,000. If we can get there during the offseason, it would be awesome. Go give us a follow, because we put even more content out over there. All right, the first mock draft we're going to look at is from Dane Brugler, who's one of the more respected draft analysts and insiders out there. And, well, in his mock draft, just 1 round, he had Miami selecting their Javon Holland replacement. But it's not Malachi Starks or Jahdae Barron, who we've talked about quite a bit. It's actually Nic Rohloff, the safety from South Carolina, who is rising up draft boards. I mean, every year you see prospects that come in and become just absolute risers due to their physical nature, their speed, their athleticism, the size. Armand Membu is one of them on the offensive line. Nic Rohloff is the other one. It's hard to really put into perspective how good he performed, but let's just say this, folks. Not often that you see a perfect 10 on the RAS score, and that is what Nick put up. A ridiculous height and weight combination of 6'3", 220, bench 20, good arm length, but ran a freakish 4.38. But also, look at the explosion grade. Vertical, 43 inches, 9.98. The broad jump, 9.99. I mean, if you had to script a perfect combine result, this is what it looks like. But he's also very productive. Like, he came into the combine as a top 50 pick. This combine performance only solidified him as a first-round selection. You looked at him, a very productive collegiate career, 3-year starter, put up gaudy numbers, 6 interceptions. The part that I really like about him, he's a tackler, man. He likes to be physical. 6'2", 220, or 6'3", 220, that speed he possesses. He gets downhill in a hurry. But he also can cover. Last season for South Carolina's defense, allowed just 60% completion percentage. No touchdowns. 4 interceptions and a QB rating when target of 37.1. I mean, this guy was going into the combine, actually ranked a higher on Dane Brugler's big board. Now, he is not the say-all, be-all, but Dane Brugler had Nic Rohloff higher than Malachi Starks on his big board entering the combine. And after the combine, it only solidified that. This is someone who is going to be very intriguing for Miami at pick 13. I think he's going to go anywhere between probably 12 to 25, and the Dolphins might scoop him up with pick number 13. And if we fast forwarded to April, and when Roger Goodell announced the pick for Miami at 13, and it was Nic Rohloff, would you like the pick? Type Y for yes, type N for no. Let me know what your thoughts are down in the comment section. Now, I will say this. I think Nic Rohloff is a great ball player. Would I be upset with him at 13? Probably not. I actually wouldn't, because he is so freakishly gifted athletically. But I will plant my stance. I'll plant my flag right now. I still have Malachi Starks as my number 1 safety. It's not a consensus, though, by any means. There are some worlds where Malachi Starks is falling in drafts. I've seen Malachi Starks go 24, 25, 27 in some mock drafts. I've seen Jahdae Barron go in that same range of mid-20s in some mock drafts. Heck, I've seen Nic Rohloff go between 24 and 27 in some mock drafts. The point is this. Those 3 DBs that can be a Javon Holland replacement all play very different styles of games. Barron can play outside corner. He can play nickel. He can play your free safety roaming guy. Stark can play free safety, play strong safety, can play nickel. And then Worry, mostly just a strong safety, won't really play the nickel, but pure safety. They're all different type of guys that all play on the back end. But there is a scenario, and this is a dream scenario in my opinion, where you go with offensive lineman or defensive lineman at pick number 13. Whether it be a Will Campbell, an Armand Membu, Kelvin Banks if they're there, to address the offensive line. Or get a Derek Harmon, a Walter Nolan, one of these other stud defensive linemen or edge rushers. But if one of those guys, like I mentioned, of Starks, Barron, Emenwari, fall to that 25, 26, 27 range, I would package up to move up and back into the first round to draft one of them. The Dolphins have a boatload of draft capital this year. They have 10 picks, 1 first, 1 second, 1 third, 2 fourths, 2 fifths, 3 sevenths. I don't know what it would cost to move up from 48 to 25 or 27, but if it costs you a future second next year, heck, I would do it. 48 in a future second to move back up into the first to get Starks, Emenwari, or Barron at 25, 26, 27. Those three are so damn good. You also get that rookie fifth-year option because they're a first-round pick. I'm telling you right now, if you go in the trenches at pick 13, but one of these stud 3 DBs on the back line are available in the mid-20s, late 20s, Chris Grier should be on the phones trying to trade up and get one of them to get that fifth-year option and solidify them in Miami. To me, that's a dream scenario, and I really hope Miami ultimately does it. All right, coming up in just a second, we're going to shift to ESPN's 2-round mock draft and see who Jordan Reed had the Dolphins selecting. But before we get into that, make sure you are subscribed to the channel because whether it be free agency this upcoming week where the Dolphins sign players or it's the NFL draft, we will have you covered with videos on the latest. Hit that sub button, join the channel right now. All right, in the ESPN 2-round mock draft, how about this, folks? Will Campbell, the offensive lineman from LSU, ends up sliding to Miami with the 13th overall pick. And as we are sitting here in early March, and you think about dream scenarios for the Miami Dolphins in late April, Will Campbell at number 13 probably is number one. Like, I'm not kidding. Some fans might say Cam Ward at 13 is the number one dream. But that's so outlandish that, like, let's not even entertain it. But Will Campbell sliding to 13 is a real possibility. And if that happens, I would be sprinting to the podium for Will Campbell. Why could he slide to 13? Well, it's all because of his size, folks. And even when you look at his RAS, relatively athletic score, very good in terms of his speed, his vertical, his ability to fit into a nice little zone run blocking scheme Miami runs. The issue with Will Campbell, he's got T-Rex arms, 32.5 inches. You see the number in the top right. He's also not the biggest guy. He's an athletic offensive lineman for sure that can absolutely move, but he, I don't think, is no longer viewed as an offensive tackle. Listen, coming into the combine, everybody was talking about what is his arm length going to be because the benchmark usually is 34-inch arms. Well, he came at 32.5. That is very, very small, folks, in relative terms. And yeah, you can get away with 33.25, 33.5-inch arms in the NFL level, but under 33, that might view him from some teams out there strictly as an offensive guard. And if you are viewed strictly as an offensive guard, you will start to fall a little bit because guards just aren't valued as high as offensive tackles. But if he was available at 13, as I mentioned, you just have to make that pick. He was unbelievable at LSU. And he had a little bit of a down year this year in comparison to the years prior. But this is someone who came into LSU as a true freshman, 18 years old, and started at left tackle. You know how hard and rare it is to see an 18-year-old true freshman start at left tackle at a prestigious SEC Power 5 school? Yeah, it's not very often you find that. He was viewed as the best offensive lineman coming into this draft class after last year. He was viewed as the top offensive lineman for most of the process, but now after the combine, Armand Membu might have passed him due to his athletic traits and physical testing. Plus, he had a really good couple seasons at Missouri. The point is this, though. Even if Campbell slides, you have to sprint to the podium if he's there at 13. I do not think Will Campbell will be on the board at 13. Make that abundantly clear. I think Membu will go in the top 10, but teams like San Francisco need to address the offensive line. The Chicago Bears need to address the offensive line. They pick 10 and 11 respectively. I would expect Will Campbell, if on the board at 10 or 11, to probably be drafted by either the Bears or the 49ers. But on an off chance that he slips by the two of them, and he's there at 13 for Miami, yeah, that's a no-brainer. You take Will Campbell. If you could tell me right now he's on the board at 13, I would turn in my card right now. I seriously would. All right, let's move over to the second-round pick from Jordan Reed, and we go safety in this specific mock draft. A player that we have discussed in the past, Xavier Watts, the Notre Dame defensive back. I like Xavier Watts. We've talked about him in depth over the past couple of months as safety targets in the draft. Watts, experienced player at Notre Dame, had an extremely good past couple seasons for the Fighting Irish in 23 and 24. I think he can do it all. He can play the run. He was unbelievably good in pass coverage this past season. Now, with a grain of salt, when speaking on Xavier Watts, I wanted it clear. Notre Dame did not play a good schedule this year. They played a lot of bad teams. They did not play anyone good. The best team they might have played, well, it actually might be Texas A&M, and even they weren't really that good. Either way, put up good numbers when it comes to the pass coverage game. 16 PBUs. How ridiculous is that? 6 interceptions. Has a knack for finding the ball. I'm a fan of Watts, and I think he'd be a great day 2 target. All right, but when talking about drafting a safety for the Miami Dolphins, what should the Dolphins do? They will be drafting one in the first 3 rounds. I think that's almost guaranteed. But when should they do it? Should they do it in the first round? If you think they should, type the ones. If you think they should wait till day 2 to draft a guy like Watts, Andrew Makuba, Jonas Sanker, Kevin Winston, Sebastian Castro, some other safeties out there, type your 2s down in the comment section. Well, when it comes to day 2 safeties, I don't think many are better than Xavier Watts. I think Emin Wari, Malachi Starks, and Jahdae Barron all ultimately go in the first round. So then when you turn your attention to DBs that play safety in round 2, I would probably put Xavier Watts as my number 1 guy. I think Andrew Makuba from Texas is continuing to rise and is one of those other top options, same as Kevin Winston, Jonas Sanker, and Sebastian Castro. But I think Watts is probably the top day 2 target at safety for the Dolphins. I would be no complaints from me if you drafted him 48th overall, assuming you went defensive line, offensive line in round 1, and made some other signings in free agency to where Watts isn't your number 1 starting safety, but would be your number 2 safety because you signed one in free agency. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of Dolphins Today. Like I said off the top, make sure you follow me on Instagram. Our handle is Dolphins Today IG, putting out content over there outside of our YouTube page. So hit that sub button, join our Instagram page and our YouTube channel. All right, that'll do it. That'll do it. That'll do. What'd you say? Yeah, King Gaming, you can send a super chat. Why not? Of course you can. Well, of course you can. Of course you can. Of course you can. Bill's saying 2. Tyson's saying 1. Listen, free agency will tell all. Dolphins sign a pair of free agent safeties. Yeah, we'll probably not draft safety in the first round. They sign 1. Well, then that becomes a higher priority. Dolphins don't sign offensive linemen free agency, well, then offensive line is definitely going to be the pick in round 1. So free agency will tell all on what Miami is going to do in the draft. It's the way I'm looking at it. That's the way I'm looking at it. I guess we'll stay live for King Gaming, assuming he's going to send in a super chat for a question. If you want us to stay live on this live show, super chat, we'll do that. If not, we'll sign off and see you next week for free agency with videos in between. While we wait for this, could you put up the weigh-in of who's your top free agent target? Would it be crazy to trade down for a few places in the first round, then trade up our second-round pick to a late first round? No, I'd be cool with that. Trade down from 13 to like 18 or 19, still get a safety or offensive lineman there, and then trade up using the capital you got trading down from 13 with 48 to get a second first-round pick. I'd be in. Ugh. There's the $5 super chat from King Gaming. Shout out to you. Shout out to you. We're going to get that on screen here in just a second. Here it is. Oh, just make sure it's, remember, I always got to be on top of these things. There you go. Oh. What could be some good trade targets for Tyreek if he's traded? He's not traded. I don't want to answer your question that, like, literally, but, like, the truth is, King Gaming, he won't be traded this offseason. Because his contract, like, trading Tyreek Hill does not benefit Miami in the slightest. You don't save any money. So if you're not saving any money to help you, what's the point of trading him? If you traded him post June 1st, it would save you money, yes, but, like, then once again, the question remains, why would you do that? Because you're just basically trading away a top wide receiver on your team and in the NFL for low capital, because you'd only get a third, fourth round pick probably for him. So it's like, why, there's no reason to trade for him. So there's really no places around. Like, you're not getting a first. You're getting at best a third round pick. Like, it's just not worth it. It's not worth it. Right now, like I said, at the deadline, if you're underachieving, sure, you could trade Tyreek Hill. I'm talking like next October. But this offseason, yeah, that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. The way I think this ends up going is if he's not traded at the deadline in October, they'll release him like I talked about on the first show we did today on this live episode. So, just saying. Just saying. All right, that's going to do it for today's show. Appreciate the $5 super chat, King Gaming. All right, folks. I'll see you guys live next week for NFL free agency. We'll have videos in between now and then breaking down the latest news and rumors surrounding the Miami Dolphins.